Now to talk a little bit about a DCF case, what was formerly known as DSS. And what generally happens when DCF becomes involved is they're called the Department of Children and Families, is somebody reports something called a 51A. And a 51A is an allegation of neglect or abuse to the child by one or both parents. What generally happens is there are mandated reporters similar to therapists, police officers, school teachers, things of that nature that are obligated, if they think there's reasonable cause to believe that a child's being neglected or abused, they're obligated to call DCF. And then there are people that are not mandated reporters, which could be a neighbor or family member or such, that might choose to call DCF. And they make an allegation, which the DCF has somebody that does the screening of the phone calls. If DCF determines that there's enough of a basis to screen in that 51A, they will do so and will assign it to a worker. The worker who handles the case for a short period of time will either be dealing with it as an emergency response worker or a 51A investigator. And it's typically where DCF then does an investigation, including talking to the person that reports the case, and that person is generally going to be anonymous and is going to be X'd out or blacked out or redacted when you get a copy of the DCF 51A. DCF then looks at the family and meets with the parents, or looks to meet with the parents. Sometimes might interview the child or children, sometimes might interview pediatricians, people from the school, things of that nature. And it's very important to get out in front of a 51A investigation, because you'd want to get DCF out of your life as soon as reasonably possible. What you'd like to do is to find that DCF unsupports the allegation, meaning that they don't find that there's a reasonable cause to believe the allegation, don't believe that either neglect or abuse should occur. There's a lot that you can do to try and work towards that goal, and you have to choose in every situation. It's different. So there's not, some attorneys will say don't open your door to DCF, other attorneys will say agree to everything that DCF wants you to do and sign any releases. From my perspective, it depends in large part on the individual situation, the individual worker, and what the allegations are. It's very important, if possible, to have an attorney present prior to having any interview with DCF, because the attorney can also be the bad guy. They can be the one that says, I don't want my client to sign that release. I don't want you to talk about this question to my client. I don't think this is appropriate. And you're not going to be penalized for what the attorney does. The attorneys are supposed to be the bad guys, the ones that are making things harder in terms of protecting your rights. Even if you're the one that doesn't want to do this, it's much better to have an attorney that's able to do so. If a 51A is supported, you have a right to a fair hearing appeal. A fair hearing appeal is something that's an administrative appeal that you go before an administrative body, which can be giving notice to DCF, both in the Fair Hearing Board in Boston, along with the particular office, whether it's the Taunton office or Fall River, or whatever city or town has the office that had done the investigation. You have to file that within 20 days, and you have to send it to the Fair Hearing Appeal. With the Fair Hearing Appeal itself, it's usually at the DCF office that the investigation is ongoing. You can have an attorney present. You can bring witnesses to that. It is recorded, and there is that fair hearing officer. It's kind of a mix between informal and formal, in that it's certainly not the same as court, but the fair hearing officer takes the evidence and takes the testimony and will make a written decision about whether that should be supported or not supported. It's something that, if you're not sure whether to file an appeal or not, generally strongly recommend filing the appeal, even if you decide not to at a later point. The worst case scenario with the Department of Children and Families is something called care and protection, which can include a removal. DCF, in that case, if a child's been removed, it's very important, again, that you would have an attorney representing you. You're entitled to something called a 72-hour hearing. DCF would have prepared an affidavit that would have submitted it to the court along with the care and protection petition, and would have asked the judge to allow the petition and ask the judge to have the removal occur on an emergency basis. you're entitled to within 72 hours to be able to have what's called a 72-hour hearing or temporary custody hearing. At that 72-hour hearing or temporary custody hearing, DCF is still obligated, because they're the petitioner, to make that to show by proof that your children should continue to be removed from the home, and that the department should have temporary custody. You're able to cross-examine the witnesses with an attorney. You're able to present evidence. You're able to testify. You're able to bring witnesses, either that will agree to go, or you can have the witnesses summoned and they'll be obligated to go. You're entitled to have your attorney get a copy of the affidavit, which is very important to go over that with you. Even if the judge determines that you would get custody back, it's a situation where the care and protection would remain open, and you still would have to have a trial in order to have DCF close the case out. You can also ask for a third party, even if DCF turns them down, to get conditional custody. So even if DCF finds that somebody has prior DCF involvement and can't be a foster care provider, you can still look for your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, somebody to have third-party custody if you want to, and you can ask for that to either be the primary thing that you want to have occur at your temporary custody hearing, or 72-hour hearing, or that can be an alternative to you looking for custody if you're not ready, but you want your mother, your brother, your sister to get custody.